From the CISO Series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Mimecast gets into human risk management with its recent acquisition. NIST creates cybersecurity playbook for generative AI, and have the Russians and the Chinese developed unhackable communications. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected for you like a veritable charcuterie board of cybersecurity news from this past week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and expertise from our returning guest, Johna Till Johnson, the CEO at Nemertes and podcaster at Heavy Strategy, one of the hosts there. Johna, thank you so much for being here. This is truly a privilege to have you back.
Well, it's great being here, Rich, and I'm really looking forward to this.
All right, before I move on and dig into the news, I can't wait to do so. We have to spend a second and thank our sponsor for today, NetSpy. Automated technology and expert human penetration testers continuously discover, test, and prioritize your global attack surface. Remember, you can join us on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOSeries.com, hit the events drop down, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. You click on it, you're joining us. We are ready to roll. Once you're there, we want you to contribute, chat it up, get in there, let us know what you think, your reaction to the news. If you have any questions for either me or Johna, I imagine one of us has expertise and the others is just a nice mouthpiece, but we will do our best to answer any of those or address your comments. Get those in. We want to hear from you. We've got about 20 minutes though, so let's jump right into this news. First up here, Mimecast gets into human risk management. Mimecast, a company whose services include email and collaboration security, announced this week that it's acquiring Elevate Security, a company that ingests what it calls inbound risk data using analytics to identify a client's riskiest users and flag high-risk people using a risk scoring algorithm. This, according to Mimecast, will provide proactive insights and deeper visibility into human behaviors and risk. So, Johna, some might ask why this announcement is newsworthy, since security companies buy each other all the time. We are in an age of consolidation, it seems. I'm curious, what are your thoughts?
Well, what I think was most interesting about this, Rich, is the fact that it puts the spotlight on the importance of the human element in cybersecurity. As one of my favorite CISOs used to say, the weakest link in any enterprise is the CBU. And everybody goes, CBU, what's that acronym? Carbon-based unit, i.e. the people. So the fact that Mimecast sat down and said, look, it's important to us to be able to quantify the risk posed by the humans, and to have the technology to do that is what's most interesting to me about that.
Yeah, and we've been recently having a lot of conversations on CISO Series podcast and just kind of in general in the community about, kind of security awareness and where that's falling down and the limits to that. And I think one of the things that's missing from a lot of that is kind of, okay, we know we all accept this as conventional wisdom. One, let's quantify it. Let's figure out where we are actually experiencing like significant risk, and that allows us to do something that isn't just punitively throwing out phishing tests all the time and that kind of stuff, right?
Well, and I think the other thing that's really important is that it allows you to focus. So to use kind of an obnoxious metaphor, instead of having, a shotgun, you've got a sniper rifle. You can say, all right, that person is behaving in a particular way that shows that that person is going to generate a much greater risk than the average human. So you don't necessarily have to keep pounding us with security awareness training. You can focus your efforts on that person.
Yeah, timely and contextual it seems like it's the name of the game these days when it comes to awareness. So more companies looking to add more tooling in that regard seems to make a lot of sense. All right, next up here, NIST creates cybersecurity playbook for generative AI. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, the cool kids call it NIST, has published a report laying out in detail the types of cyber attacks that could be aimed at AI systems, as well as possible defenses against them. According to its statement, the agency believes such a report is critical because current defenses against cyber attacks on AI systems are lackluster. At a time when AI is increasingly pervading all aspects of life and business, just look at any news source and you will find a story about AI as proof of that point. So, John, NIST entitled this threat adversarial machine learning. I'm curious, what's the value of this announcement in your opinion? I guess does the NIST report provide concrete assistance here?
Well, I think the thing that's cool about NIST, not just that the cool kids call it NIST, but also the thing that's cool about it is it specializes in giving people a way to think about things.
Hmm.
It doesn't have all the answers. In fact, even in the 109-page report, which I read, it's not going to have all the answers, and it says up front it doesn't have all the answers, but it gives you a way to think about what the questions are, so you can check the box and say, yes, I've thought about this. And right now, I don't have an answer, or yes, I've thought about this, and this is how we're remediating. And the fact that they've moved so quickly on the threats posed by AI is what I think is really interesting here. Because in past decades, it took them years to come up with something relatively straightforward like the cybersecurity framework. And now they sort of spun this out in a matter of months. And I think that's super helpful. So, my recommendation is that for any CISOs or senior level cybersecurity professionals, definitely you or someone on your team should read this and make sure to blend it into your framework.
Yeah. Providing that framework to allow you to again, because any kind of concrete steps are always going to, the devil's in the details. So there's a limited utility to that. But yeah, providing that, and I also think, increasingly, as I've just watching the coverage of kind of evolving AI security practices, or at least methodologies, realizing that while the capabilities of these systems are, transformative potentially in a lot of different ways, a lot of the concerns that we have are fundamentally like the same, of like who's accessing what, where is how do we track data that's going into these systems, how do we track data that's going out of them, like the challenges we know, even if maybe they're at another scale of magnitude, I think is always important to keep in mind too.
Well, and I think the main thing about the adversarial machine learning here is this concept of a taxonomy. And
Hmm.
taxonomy sounds like a boring word, but essentially it says, for example, here are types of poisoning attacks, which is useful to know because
Yeah.
you go from general to specific. There are a series of attacks called poisoning. Here are, 5 different flavors of them, and so forth and so on. So I think that's the most important thing. I'm a big fan of taxonomies generally.
Yeah, not NIST, turns out, not just a cool name. Next story here. China and Russia test hack-proof quantum communication. Quoting directly from BNN Breaking, China and Russia have reportedly conducted tests on a hack-proof communication link utilizing quantum key distribution, or QKD. This breakthrough signifies a major advancement in cybersecurity, potentially revolutionizing secure communication and mitigating threats of cyber espionage and data breaches. So, John, it's always comforting to hear how potential adversaries are revolutionizing unhackable communication techniques. I'm sure the NSA sleeps better at night because of that. So, how real is this stuff? Is this a real breakthrough? Is this a PR announcement? We know a lot of puffery can come out of both of these countries at times, and I'm curious what are your thoughts of the fact that it's coming from China and Russia, not exactly neutral parties from a U.S. perspective.
Exactly, and I think, Rich, that's the main point here. QKD is not a breakthrough. People have been doing QKD. There are lots of different solutions. We do it here in the US, so it's not like, "Oh my god, this is something brand new that came from somewhere else." Now, it is the case that it's using infrastructure that's not readily accessible to shall I say, commercial non-intelligence folks. But I would be deeply surprised if they're doing anything unique here that we're not doing in the US. I think the main thing is that they're letting the world know about it and letting the world know about the fact that they're partnering on this, because that just serves to remind everybody that these are two of the five top nation state adversaries. These are the guys who spend enormous amounts of money, time, and energy on attacking other countries and pretending they didn't. So the fact that they're now announcing that they've got quantum key distribution it's a wake up call, is the way I would put it.
Yeah, and kind of along with the NIST quantum cryptography standards that we saw published last year,
That got
it's
hacked.
yeah, well, yeah, that immediately they found flaws with, which is why you publish them. To be fair, the just the idea that though that we are now, this is now coming down the road. This is not science fiction. This is not 10 to 30 years down. We are facing the practical realities increasingly of this. So I'm curious to see when we will see whatever national laboratory does this test in satellites next, and the US side, or what, how we keep seeing this evolve and become commonplace from nation states, and then into the hyperscale enterprise players too.
Well, Rich, we work with a lot of the FFRDCs, and so I could answer that question and tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Okay, well, my wife and children appreciate your discretion. Next up here, New York hospitals sue cloud provider for return of data. Two New York hospitals are seeking a court order to force the Boston-based cloud storage company Wasabi Technologies to return stolen data stored on one of its servers by the Lockbit ransomware gang. According to Bleeping Computer, the Carthage Area Hospital and Claxton Hepburn Medical Center were attacked in September, with the Lockbit affiliate renting cloud storage at Wasabi to store stolen data. The hospitals were requesting the court to force Wasabi to provide and delete the data from their server. So this story in every show where I have to kind of look over my metaphorical glasses. I left them in the bathroom, unfortunately, in a
Yeah.
very school marmy fashion. And this one comes up pretty quick. I guess is it normal for the world's most infamous cyber criminals to just rent space from a legitimate cloud provider in Wasabi? And I guess what should these cloud providers or their customers do about this?
Well, first, yes, it's completely normal. Where else are they going to rent space to store their ill-gotten gain? And really, if you think about this for 20 seconds, you realize you don't want cloud providers to be policing their customers at that level because A, that means they actually know what you're putting on their servers, and you really, even if you're completely legit, you don't want them looking at your stuff. And B, how are they to make the decision that something is ill-gotten?
Yeah.
What I think this means for the cloud providers and their customers, I think Wasabi is behaving badly because it shouldn't have to be sued to make make restitution to the customers.
Well,
And yeah,
it is working with the FBI and has handed over data to the FBI, according to the reporting I saw on Bleeping Computer. So, I mean, they are not being completely resistant, at least.
right. But I mean, if the customers are saying, "Look, you need to give us the data and delete it from your servers," that should be just a no-brainer. And the fact that it isn't highlights something that's much bigger than cybersecurity, which is the hidden risk to SaaS providers and cloud providers generally is that they're terrible at offloading your data. So even if you decided to switch from Amazon to Azure, yeah, good luck with getting all your stuff off their servers, guaranteeing that it's off their servers and moving it to wherever you need to move it, which is something that generally most enterprise technologists never think of it about end of life. And they certainly don't think about what happens when you move from cloud provider A to cloud provider B or simply cease your relationship. So I think the worry here for customers is at a much bigger level, which is you should always nail down the terms and conditions under which you can remove data from a cloud provider, whether they're going to charge you for it, and a whole bunch of other things, including the cybersecurity issues.
What stood out to me with this story is just a cloud provider desperately not trying to get into any kind of content moderation. Like
Exactly.
knowing that the game is over the second they start engaging with any of that was really what stood out to me with this. I found very interesting in our age of where we see that in social media all the time. I think it's super fascinating.
Well, and it makes a lot of sense because there's a whole framework of laws that got set up for the telecommunications providers. And I can remember even 15 years ago, people screaming and yelling about, oh my God, the carriers are going to do awful things. And I'm like, why are you worried about the carriers and not worried about Google?
Yeah, yeah,
Speaking of
exactly.
which,
And CCL in our chat was wondering if they were using customer managed key. So
and that I don't know if they were in this case. I
mhm,
actually don't know the answer to that, but happy to look into it a little bit further because that's a good question and a
that's very
valid one.
thank you, CCL. And thank you also to our sponsor for today, which we are thanking right now, NetSpy. Take the hassle out of dealing with alert fatigue, validation, and prioritization. Instead, use NetSpy's ASM platform to hone in on what's actually important. Attack surface vulnerabilities constantly evolve, causing a lack of visibility and overwhelming your security teams. Start the new year off right by partnering with NetSpy to enhance your security program. Visit netspy.com/ASM. Google settles $5 billion incognito mode lawsuit. Speaking about knowing what you have,
All right.
relevant story right here. Google has agreed to settle a class action lawsuit filed in June 2020 that alleged the company misled users by tracking their internet usage even when their browsers were in incognito or private mode. The plaintiffs allege that Google violated federal wiretap laws by using Google Analytics to track user activity. Google tried to dismiss the lawsuit by pointing to its messages it displayed, informing users that their activity still might be visible to websites they visit, their organization, or their ISP. So does Google have a point here, Johna? Is it still caveat emptor for these users, or I guess should they be more clear about what they mean when they're saying incognito? despite, the warning that shows up every time you open that tab.
Well, I I I I find it amazing that anybody thinks they're using Google and anything is incognito because look, guys, Google is in the business of selling eyeballs to advertisers. That's it. You aren't getting all the goodness of all the things that Google offers for free without them extracting their pound of flesh somehow. And this is it. So you are the product. So you have to assume that whatever they tell you, they're going to do the absolute bare minimum to protect you and your data. And that's just the way it is. And if that's a problem, don't use Google.
Yeah, yeah, it's in terms of like being sympathetic to, we put the warning up. I mean, this seems, I mean, the one thing that stood out to me, $5 billion, while couch cushion money for Google, is still a lot bigger than we've seen with a lot of other privacy focused settlements. So
I would be yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if they actually settled for 5 billion. It does say that the company sought 5 billion and the terms were not discussed.
this is
I'm
true.
sure I'm sure the lawyers got paid. That I think we can all be sure about. Beyond
Yes.
that,
Think
you
of
know
the poor lawyers. Come on.
exactly.
They're
But
working
no,
hard.
I really think people need to clearly understand Google's business model
Mhm.
and understand that it's the underpinnings for everything they do. That's where the money comes from. So they cannot afford to give you full privacy, because if they do that, then they don't make any money.
Definitely something to always keep in mind when you're interacting with any online service, Google or otherwise. Next up here, a call for a formal ban on ransomware payments. The security firm EmsiSoft published a blog post calling for a legally mandated ban on ransomware payments, citing 300 ransomware attacks in the U.S. against hospitals, schools, and government bodies, costing an average of $1.5 million each to mitigate, and that's just in the last year. Some critics say that in the long term, a ban may be warranted, but on the other hand, might prove impossible to enforce and potentially cause more harm for organizations that lack resiliency and IT maturity. So, John, what's your take on this? Would the cure be worse than the disease?
Well, I don't really know. This is where I come to I'm a geek. I'm not a politician. I'm not even a good social engineer. So I couldn't tell you what the right answer is. I will say that a lot of my clients have to deal with the fact that if there's any reason to believe that the attacker is a nation state attacker, it is already illegal to pay them. Which is kind of interesting because quite a lot of my clients don't realize that and are kind of going, wait a minute, hang on. We can't pay them because we just broke the law. Now, realistically, nobody's been sent to jail for this. Nobody's been severely punished, but it is a federal law that you are not supposed to be paying ransomware attackers.
Hmm.
So if you take that to the next level and say it doesn't matter where they're coming from, you shouldn't pay. I think the challenge is that you're trying to clamp down on the crime without clamping down on the criminals, and I'm not sure that works.
Yeah. Well, and on the other hand, we have seen much more aggressive law enforcement focusing in takedowns. We've seen the FBI starting to reorganize itself to better try and disrupt these gangs. So, I mean, definitely seems to be coming at it from both sides. I will say personally, just since kind of following the space much more closely with the CISO series, I have become much more sympathetic to not taking absolutist positions of never pay the ransom. Like, I can understand from a business's perspective, if there's a chance I can resume business operations sooner after this attack by
Right.
paying X amount of dollars, I'm at least sympathetic to that they don't have to carry the burden of, well, we need to lift all ships by not paying because that's going to help the ecosystem in the long run. Like, I, you
Right,
know,
you're just taking it out on the victim of the crime
yes,
in order to, stamp out the crime. I'd rather have them turn their time and energy on the actual criminals.
yes, exactly, exactly. All right, and our last story here today, the FTC asked for ideas to fight voice cloning. The Federal Trade Commission opened a call for submissions on how to fight fraud with text to speech technology. To qualify for the $25,000 prize, submissions must include ideas on how to prevent malicious parties from accessing voice cloning software, improve real time voice cloning detection, and then provide a way to detect cloned voices in already recorded clips. So, this might seem like an echo of what we've already talked about in terms of feasibility. I'm curious, Johna, have you seen success in? We've all seen success in bug binding programs. Nothing to be
Mhm.
curious about there. But is this topic maybe just too broad for this type of approach to work? Or I'm curious, do you see it as the best way to solve this problem? Like, hey, let's reach out to people's creativity to see what we can come up with.
Well, I'm not going to go out and say something is the best way to do something, but I will say that, one of the tenets of digital transformation is this whole notion of crowdsourcing. And yes, many ideas are better than fewer. And typically, with a reward in play, people tend to come up with really good, interesting ideas that folks wouldn't otherwise come up with. So, as a general strategy, I think this makes sense. And the question of fighting voice cloning, I think it makes particular sense because there's kind of the big picture of, well, there are some scenarios in which voice cloning is a problem, but it's very open ended. So you could come in and say, well, here's some scenarios you haven't even thought about that we're delivering solutions for. And I think that is the greater value. It's almost less about finding the solutions and more about finding the problems, the unknown unknowns, and also proposing a solution for those.
And doing also within the understanding that this is a vital accessibility technology that's transformative
Right.
to a lot of people, and not wanting to have things flagged as spam or something like that for someone that's using this for its intended purpose, to punish people for legitimately using it too. I think is also an important one of the things that makes it challenging, particularly for any kind of solution.
Well, and I would also highlight the fact that it is the FTC, which is a great use of, as a taxpayer, they're spending $25,000 to come up with probably a million or $2 million worth of interesting, innovative ideas. Because
Yeah.
if you had to hire all those scientists and then have them come up with ideas, it would cost a heck of a lot more than $25,000. I can guarantee you that.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm curious to see the entry is not open very long. I think it actually closes this month. So I will be interested to see what kind of solutions are out there.
Well,
I was also
I hope they don't tell you actually. That's my big worry is if they share too much information,
That's true.
then you're giving information to the hackers. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yeah, moving the or yeah, making it easier to see the goalposts, for sure. Okay, and I take that back. I hope I don't see any more, and I just hope the situation gets better. One thing that did get better is we had some comments in our chat from CCL, from David, from Carrie. Carrie, just dropping jokes in the chat. What do you call a cat in a Formula One car? Meow, like the Doppler, I think, like vroom, like
Yeah.
thing. I think it worked better in text format. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everyone in our chat for getting in there and giving us your thoughts. Johna, before we get out of here, was there any story that stood out to you, a thumbs up or an eye roller, that was your favorite today?
You warned me you were gonna ask this, and I thought about it, and I'd have to come down on the NIST one, to be honest,
Hmm.
because even though I have been roundly critical of a lot of the things NIST does, I do think the fact that coming up with a taxonomy and helping people sort through something that is a top of mind concern right now and doing it in a timely fashion, I think is really important. And if there's one takeaway from the whole thing, I would say have if you're a CISO, have your teams look at this, go through it, make sure you guys have dotted the I's and crossed the T's. Don't expect anything earth shattering because it is NIST, but NIST does have a good way of saying, let's make sure you've looked at all the moving parts.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Johna Till Johnson, the CEO at Nemertes. Truly, truly appreciate giving us your time and your expertise on this. Now, you're super busy with a whole lot of stuff. You got some podcast. You're podcasting with Greg Farrow. You're doing all this interesting stuff. Where can people find you on the internet if they want to check it out?
Well, my favorite place is to come to the website, which is nemertes.com, and click on the community button and ask to join our community. That's where we hang out. We post all sorts of things of interest. It's private, so it's not necessarily shared with the whole world. That's my favorite. You can also hit us up at Heavy Strategy, which is our podcast, the one that you mentioned with Greg Farrell. Great place to go. And last but not least, I am on LinkedIn and I do respond to people reaching out.
Fantastic. We'll have links to all of those in our show notes, so be sure to check those out as well. Thank you also to our sponsor for today, NetSpy. Automated technology and expert human penetration testers continuously discover, test, and prioritize your global attack surface. John, thank you just so much again. If I have not reiterated this enough, I truly I could go an hour talking about all these stories or more. Truly amazing. And thanks to our audience today. If you're watching live, if you're watching later, we love having a great community here of listeners that are always letting us know that they're enjoying the shows that we're putting out there. And we hope you found this informative. Be sure you come back next week for Super Cyber Friday, where the topic will be hacking the data privacy paradox. an hour of critical thinking on where to find the balance between business operations and personal information. We'll also be back next week with another Week in Review show, and you get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines. Every single day, give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.